wondering how I got into this mix. Mind playing tricks and I'm fiending for a fix. Habits overriding, imploding into explosion. Tapering away like ocean coastal.
Hello, this is Derrick Bros on the Conscious Resistance Live, and you are listening to the Conscious Resistance Network. Today is Monday, May 11th, 2014. It's the day after Mother's Day. I hope you guys had a good Mother's Day. If you have a good, positive relationship with your mom, I hope you got to spend some time with her. And if not, and if your mom is crazy and evil and messed up, well then I hope you were as far away from her as possible and they did something else that was fun. Either way, I hope you had a good weekend. It's been a couple weeks since I've been here doing the show. I took some time off. First I was in Philadelphia releasing my book, and then I was in Detroit. And we'll talk more about that in just a moment. But it feels good to be back. First, I want to invite you guys to follow us on our social media for the Conscious Resistance Network. You can find us on YouTube at youtube.com/consciousresistance, where there are tons of different videos, vlogs, video essays, interviews, rants, all kinds of things. And they cover topics ranging from consciousness, spirituality, anarchy, liberty, freedom, and everything in between there. You can also find us on Facebook at the Conscious Resistance Network. Follow us on Twitter at TheConsciousRN. And if you want to listen to the audio editions of our work, of these podcasts and other videos, follow our SoundCloud at soundcloud.com/TCR live. And if you'd like to follow me personally, you can find me on Twitter at dbroze, DBROZE, live free. I am no longer on Facebook. I left that monster for a temporary time or possibly forever. We'll see. But anyways, so as I mentioned, I was in Philadelphia for the release of my book, The Conscious Resistance: Reflections on Anarchy and Spirituality, which you can find at theconsciousresistance.com/book. And you can download the PDF for free, or you can order yourself a physical copy. And so far we've been getting great reviews for the book. It was very well received at the conference in Philadelphia. We gave out 250 copies of the book, which is a good feeling. For the most part. There was some mistakes and some errors and typos in the book, and we gave them away anyways. But now the book has been updated and should be, the physical copies that you can order should be updated online in the next couple days. But that was a fun experience. Got to see lots of good friends and people that I work with online and see them in person, and that's always a good feeling. Also, as I mentioned, I went to Detroit, and I just got back last week. I was in Detroit reporting for Mint Press News on the police situation in Detroit and the response to that from companies and people like Dale Brown and Detroit Threat Management. I was there to cover the community revival and pushing forth community gardens, community houses, co-ops, things like that. I was also there to document the latest in the water situation from the Detroit Water Brigade, who is fighting against the city shutting off water to thousands of people, and to just look more into the issue of water privatization and how those people are directly being affected by that in Detroit. And it was a great time, and I'm really looking forward to get that out to you guys, because there's going to be some quality videos and articles coming out over the next couple weeks from Mint Press News, and the videos will be on the Conscious Resistance website. And yeah, so look out for that. Lots of exciting stuff coming up. And every week here on the Conscious Resistance Live, I cover my top stories for truthandmedia.com, formerly benswan.com, theantimedia.org, and mintpressnews.com. You can also find my work periodically on tonystyles.com, activistpost.com, and a few other websites that carry my stuff. And if you want to look at all my articles, go to derrickbros.contently.com, and you can see all of my latest articles and do your own research. And also on this podcast, I like to cover the latest from the Conscious Resistance Network, from myself and from the team of people who work with me. So let's get into that before we dive into the top news of this past week. The most recent video that I've released was called My Experience Selling Drugs on the Black Market. #agorism. And this is exactly what it sounds like. I describe my experience selling crystal meth, selling LSD, and selling psilocybin mushrooms, both before and after going to prison for selling drugs, and how this is a revolutionary market act, and go over the associated risks and just some of the stigmas attached to that. I think you might find that interesting. We also had an article written by our contributor Dominic, who wrote, "The cult of American Sniper is out of control," about the recent death threats and rape threats issued to former RT correspondent and Breaking the Set host Abby Martin, which is definitely an interesting look at the insanity of this stuff. We've also got an interview with Gabriel Scheer, voluntarist, entrepreneur, and founder of Fort Galt. That's coming from Peaceful Anarchism, aka Danilo. And I also released another video called Finding Freedom at Eeyore's Birthday in Austin, Texas, which is about that event in Austin, Texas called Eeyore's Birthday. I'll leave the video to explain to you what it is exactly and what it has to do with freedom. And then I also did another video called Exposing State Propaganda, ISIS, Garland, and Texas, which is exactly what it sounds like. And Danilo wrote a piece called Prohibition Only Enlarges State Power and Creates Black Markets. And going back a little bit further, there's a video from me called Non-Voting as Strategy, Not Apathy. Times 100 Influential People of 2015 is a Joke. You've got a chapter from my book, Towards Panarchy, Anarchy Without Adjectives. You've got an interview from Michael Freeman. Tons and tons of content. And of course, our music spotlight. The latest one from Kyle Bent called The Money, which is really interesting, about people chasing money, looking for happiness. And we should have a new music spotlight up by this evening, Monday. So lots of content going on our website, and I hope you guys will subscribe to our channel and check it regularly. And if you want to become a contributor, get in touch with us, because we're always looking for new ideas, new thoughts, and opinions. So continue to support us, and we will continue to push the message of conscious resistance. So what do we have in the news today? First story that I'm going to cover with you guys is from truthandmedia.com, and it is called Department of Justice Reveals New Details of StingRay Cell Phone Surveillance. And at least two reveal new details, excuse me. And if you know that I've been keeping up with this, you know my work, you know that I've been keeping up with the StingRay story for the last couple years, and really it's been something that I've been keeping up with, especially in Houston, questioning the chief several times on the use of these machines, and really in general just coming at this situation, trying to expose the lies around it and educate people that, hey, the police officers are using this kind of technology. You'd be wise to be educated about it, to know how it works, to know how you can avoid it, and just in general to be a smart person and not let the cops get the upper hand on you. So this latest news item, though, is related to the Department of Justice apparently telling the Wall Street Journal that they are working on a plan to begin revealing details of the use of StingRay tools all around the country. Officials with the Justice Department told the Wall Street Journal that they are going to launch this review into how law enforcement agencies use the controversial technology. Of course, StingRays are just a brand name of a tool called cell site simulators, which can gather up information, data from your phone by pretending to be a cell tower and then gathering up all your information. This is being used in secret by federal government agencies and local law enforcement who are continuing to deny that it exists or that they're using it, namely because they have signed non-disclosure agreements and promised the company and the FBI that they will not disclose any details. So this is obviously leading to a situation where conspiracies are going to be created about why the secrecy exists, and also it's just making us less safe and making people less safe and creating a further divide between the people and the so-called authorities. Devlin Barrett, he's the Wall Street Journal reporter behind the story, he tweeted that the internal review began before Attorney General Eric Holder left office. A DOJ spokesman apparently stated that the department is, quote, examining its policies to ensure they reflect the department's continuing commitment to conducting its vital missions while according appropriate respect for privacy and civil liberties. Blah, 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 blah. Bullshit. The announcement comes after the FBI released thousands of pages of heavily redacted documents related to StingRays. And when I say heavily redacted, I mean like every single page was blanked out and there was nothing on there to see. And this comes as a result of a FOIA request from the website Muckrock. And although the content of the documents were heavily censored, the recipients of the communications indicate that the FBI has been passing on information to StingRays to state and local departments around the country. And there's only been one release of a manual. That was in March, and I write about that as well. And I also have a guide to StingRay surveillance technology if you want to learn more about it. But this is, I'd say, the result of people like myself and others around the country just pushing and grinding away locally, trying to force them to reveal new details, and we've made it into a national news item, and now people are talking about it. to the point that the government says they're going to respond and actually do something about this. We'll see how that plays out. But in other surveillance news, other StingRay news related to Baltimore, the Baltimore Black Lives Matter, Freddie Gray protests, we see the use of StingRays. So this one is really interesting as well, because it's just one of those things that wouldn't have happened without the internet, and really just shows you the power of crowdsourcing investigations and information through the power of the internet. During the protests following Freddie Gray's death, Baltimore resident Benjamin Shane noticed a plane flying overhead, circling the area repeatedly. The plane's movement happened to coincide with the protest in the days following the death of Freddie Gray. Shane decided to ask the internet, specifically the Twitterverse, what they thought about it, and he tweeted out, "Anyone know who has been flying the light plane in circles above the city for the last few nights?" And then a former employee of the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, just happened to see the tweet and was actually able to identify the plane, a Cessna 182T, its flight path, and the registered owner, NG Research. The former ACLU employee contacted the ACLU in Maryland, who then passed it on to the national ACLU so they could investigate it and see exactly what was up with this plane. In response to these revelations, the ACLU has now filed Freedom of Information requests with the FBI, DEA, and U.S. Marshals Service seeking information about the flights. They've also filed a FOIA request with the FAA to attempt to obtain the flight plans. And this is just, I think, the latest confirmation for many of us activists, journalists, and protesters who understand the level of surveillance and scrutiny that we're facing, and that when you combine this with drones, when you combine the StingRays with all these different things, you start to see a picture that is heavily surveyed and where people are going to be afraid to go out. They're going to get documented, they're going to get cataloged, and there might be pressure applied to these people, these individuals, and perhaps if there was some futuristic, chaotic martial law type situation, which has happened in the past, then these individuals who are being monitored and targeted might be some of the first to disappear. So how does StingRays play into this plane? Well, in 2014, the Wall Street Journal revealed the existence of a cell phone monitoring program being operated by the U.S. Marshals Service using small planes. The program involved the Marshals using Cessna planes mounted with StingRays, which we just discussed. But they're called dirt boxes, or DRT boxes, when they're in planes, and they're supposed to be used for criminal investigations, but the ACLU says that they can collect data from tens and thousands of people on a single flight. The Electronic Frontier Foundation has filed a FOIA request with the Department of Justice and FBI, but has yet to receive any new information. The EFF has now filed a lawsuit against the DOJ and the FBI to force them to release new details. And in early March of 2015, it was further revealed that the CIA has actually been working with the Marshals on the program. Over the last 10 years, the U.S. Marshals Technical Operations Group worked with the CIA's Office of Technical Collection to develop the DRT dirt boxes. The agency spent more than $1 million developing this technology. And also, the Washington Post writes about another mass surveillance technique that uses aircraft that you should be aware of. This one is known as wide area surveillance, and it involves high-resolution cameras installed on planes to monitor entire cities. The Washington Post writes, "Every moving pedestrian and vehicle can be tracked, the beginning and end of everyone's journey and the route taken in between. This gives the authorities the power to press rewind on anybody's movements and to learn a lot of intrusive things about how they live their life." Among the companies offering this technology are major defense contractors working for the Pentagon and an Ohio company called Persistent Surveillance Systems, which is trying to sell it to local police departments. And an unnamed government official, we're just supposed to trust that, told the Post that the flights were part of an operation being handled by the FBI at the request of the local police. The official said the planes were using infrared cameras to monitor movements of people in the vicinity, and they denied, though, that these planes were using cell site simulators or the DRT boxes to monitor cell phone communications. Apparently, they're just tracking your movements, not listening to your cell phones. I guess that's a little better. And Jay Stanley, senior policy analyst with the ACLU's Speech, Privacy, and Technology Project, says that the authorities might not have been monitoring communications, but he still says this is a dangerous situation. He says, quote, "We as a society are going to need to grapple with what kinds of rules are needed for such devices. We need to strike the right balance between the needs of law enforcement and the need to protect the privacy of individuals and prevent our country from becoming a surveillance society." Bingo. How do you do that? How do you stop the surveillance state? How do you stop the surveillance society? You get up, you get involved, you start spreading awareness, use your social media accounts to do that. Get out on the streets, talk to people, print out flyers, make zines, do podcasts, radio shows, videos, talk to anybody that'll listen, and try to focus on solutions. Show them these things that are going on, but show them that there are tons and tons of ways to make yourself more secure. I would also learn about encryption, do tons of things to get yourself involved. Next, we're going to move on to a couple of health stories. This first one comes from truthandmedia.com. It's about the USDA and ongoing corruption in that agency, and of course in bureaucracies around the government. Food safety and environmental groups demand investigation into USA. A group of scientists are calling on the U.S. Department of Agriculture to investigate claims of suppression of research on the dangers of a controversial class of pesticides. I've talked about this before. If you go back to our older videos, you'll find one on neonicotinoids, which are a class of pesticides that are based on nicotine and are being shown more and more to be probably poisonous to not only bees but to other animals. On May 5th, 25 organizations representing farm workers, environment and food safety organizations sent a letter to officials within the USDA and Environmental Protection Agency calling for an investigation into claims that scientists are facing pressure and retaliation for research that prevents the controversial neonicotinoid insecticide in a negative light. The group say that they are concerned with a recent report from Reuters detailing threats to scientists who speak out about dangers of the pesticide. These threats include suspension without pay and threats of damage to careers. The scientists filed a petition in March asking for more protection. They said, quote, "The action filed on Thursday by the Public Employees for Environmental Responsibility, an advocacy group for local, state, and federal researchers, came less than a week after the World Health Organization group found the inactive ingredient in Roundup, glyphosate, the world's best-selling weed killer, is, quote, probably carcinogenic to humans. Roundup is made by Monsanto." Of course, the petition to the USDA asks the agency to adopt policies that will prevent, quote, political suppression of alteration of studies and to lay out clear procedures for investigating allegations of scientific misconduct. So straight up, these scientists are just saying that, look, we're facing pressure, possible suspension or loss of job or cuts in pay for if we are talking negatively about GMOs, they said, and these pesticides. The executive director of Public Employees for Environmental Responsibility, Jeff Ruck, told Common Dreams that the petition was based on the experiences of 10 USDA scientists who allegedly faced backlash for research on neonicotinoid insecticides and glyphosate, which is, of course, the ingredient in Roundup, Monsanto's Roundup, as well as research on genetically modified crops. The neonics, like I said, they're a class of pesticides that they were first developed in 1991 and began commercial use through the 90s, and around 2006 commercial beekeepers began reporting what is now known as colony collapse disorder. So I'm not saying 100% that these chemicals are killing them, but I would definitely bet on it, and I bet that they're poisoning the soil and everything else, and that's going to have an effect on us. The scientists, the groups in their letter to the EPA and the USDA expressed deep concern that the effects of the pesticide are having harmful effects on the animals and the environment. They said, quote, "Bees, butterflies, birds, and other critical pollinators are in great peril and populations are dwindling worldwide. A growing body of scientific evidence has implicated neonicotinoids as a leading driver of bee declines and glyphosate as a leading driver of the destruction of milkweed, the sole food source for monarch butterflies. Recently, the World Health Organization's arm, the International Agency for Cancer Research, updated their cancer determination for glyphosate, classifying as probably carcinogenic to humans after reviewing scientific research from 17 of the world's top oncology experts from 11 different countries. Of course, this recent change from the World Health Organization also comes after a 2014 study that was published in the journal Nature, which found a strong correlation between the pesticides measured in surface freshwater and lower population growth rates of 14 different species of birds in the Netherlands. That study suggests that the bird population may be drinking infected water or feeding their offspring infected insects. There's even more recently, we have a study from Swedish scientists showing that it's the first study of neonicotinoids in the wild. They examined 16 patches of land with canola seeds, half of which were sprayed with the pesticide and the other half which were not. The researchers found that wild bees displayed negative health effects, while honeybee populations, which pollinate crops with assistance from humans, did not display the illness. A second study found that in laboratory tests, bees are not deterred by the pesticide, but may in fact prefer the crops sprayed with the chemicals. This could indicate an addiction to the nicotine in the pesticides. And both of these studies were published in the journal Nature. And the lead author on this study said that the reduction in bee health was, quote, more dramatic than I ever expected. He told Reuters that the bees sprayed with a pesticide also had not gained any significant weight compared to the normal colonies. And these scientists ended their letter with this question, which I think is a very powerful question and one that we all must ask. If the USDA is censoring and suppressing its own scientists who are calling into question the hazards of these dangerous pesticides, how can the USDA be expected to co-chair this task force and develop a meaningful federal strategy that will truly protect bees, birds, monarchs, and other critical pollinators, and not a strategy that only protects the profits of the pesticide industry? And this is all around, guys. This is government corruption all around, not just in the health industry. How do we stop that? Well, for one, stop freaking buying Roundup. Stop supporting these mega farms and farming industries that use Monsanto and use these pesticides. You know, even if you think GMOs are going to do good things, which they don't, do some better research. Talk to me about that. One of the side effects of GMOs seems to be this increase. Now, I'm not saying the technology in some possible future couldn't be used in a way that didn't require such pesticides, and we just haven't got there. But I also tend to think that playing God and messing with nature is probably not the best thing, and I think there will be effects, and we can't really measure what those are going to be exactly, but we're starting to see them, it seems. In general, though, there's corruption all over the government, and whether it's the influence of companies like Monsanto or these other pesticides, Dow Chemical and the others, it's happening, and the only way it's going to stop is if we stop supporting it and stop funding it. So stop paying taxes, stop supporting these industries. In other health environmental news, I wrote an article for the Anti-Media titled Invasion of the Genetically Engineered Trees. And yeah, I know it's kind of silly, but I figured it would get some people's attention, and they made a cool graphic for it, and that's kind of cool. It's got a kid with trees growing out of his hand. But it's about a very serious topic, and one I've been wanting to write about for a while that I've been keeping up with. And it's brief, but I will go through it and explain to you why you should be aware and possibly concerned with genetically engineered trees. As I was just saying, I think that messing with nature is going to have certain ramifications that we can't exactly predict just yet, and that we need to be safe. And I don't even know, how do you conduct an experiment like that? You just go into the wild and do whatever you want, and you figure out 20 years or however from there whether or not it had a dangerous effect or harmful effect to the people or the planet. I don't know how you do a dry test for this, but I just don't think maybe we should be doing it. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you ought to be doing something. The fight against genetically engineered trees has become a global phenomenon, with resistance in the United States and Brazil growing daily. On April 9th, the Brazilian Technical Commission on Biosafety officially approved a request to plant genetically engineered eucalyptus trees. This approval marks the first time a commercial entity has been allowed to plant GE trees in Latin America. The company behind the efforts, Futuragene, may soon face legal challenges from concerned environmental groups and advocates. Winnie Overbeek with the World Rainforest Movement told Common Dreams that the organization has ignored the concerns and protests from the people, including letters signed by more than 100,000 people. Overbeek says the commission is moving forward despite the urgent need for detailed studies of the various impacts of this dangerous technology. Even though this violates the 2008 decision on GE trees made by the UN Convention on Biological Diversity, to which Brazil is a signatory, she says. So, doing it despite signing on to treaties with international organizations that we all knew they weren't going to follow anyways. Geneticist Dr. Ricarda Steinbrecher, co-director of EcoNexus and member of the Federation of German Scientists, said the regulation by nation states will not be enough because, quote, the large-scale dispersion of reproductive material means GE trees are likely to cross national borders. In early March, around 1,000 women from a variety of social movements protested against Futuragene in Sao Paulo, Brazil. The women were joined by activists from around the globe on 5 continents protesting the release of the trees. The resistance to the GE trees is also gaining ground in the United States. In January 2015, the United States Department of Agriculture announced that it would not regulate the first genetically engineered trees to be planted in the U.S. Not regulate. So, let's pause here for a moment and talk about this. Obviously, as an anarchist or as somebody who opposes government intervention, regulation is not typically something that I'm looking to do. Although I've been listening more and more to people make arguments about, making small wins for liberty, and if somebody votes for something locally and it chips away at the tyranny that we're having to deal with, then you can't really argue against that. And I would say so. So maybe if there was a instance where regulation needed to take place, where at least in the current status paradigm that we have, if you could do something to stave off the government's attack on the planet or the people while working towards a more free society, then I guess that wouldn't be a bad thing. But I mean, because how do you deal with this new technology like this GE eucalyptus? I mean, we're not having the ability to test this because, as I said, you can't really test GE trees without putting them into the wild. But we don't know how this is going to affect the planet, and scientists are already warning about the possibilities that are going to happen. And also, as I'm about to go into, not only that, but it's a continued attack on indigenous populations in different parts of the world. So where I typically am not looking for government regulation, I'm definitely not looking for government regulation. I believe, okay, in this instance, you don't want government action, and if government probably won't act anyways, or if they do, it'll just be some bullshit deal, then I totally support putting your body on the line. And I really feel like this is something where I would be willing to lay down on the line, literally, to try to stop these trees and try to help the planet. Something I'm feeling more and more inclined to as I realize that I am an earth warrior and I take myself down that path. So the USDA released a response letter to Arborgen, the biotech company behind the trees, including the loblolly pine. The letter stated that the U.S. government will not stand in the way of planting the untested tree. Arborgen also has plans for a GE eucalyptus forest in South Carolina, Florida, and Texas. Critics worry about the effects of planting these trees and the risks of cross-pollination. Doug Guria-Sherman of the Center for Food Safety said the USDA is ignoring public concern, and he also said in 2013 the USDA was overwhelmed with thousands of public comments speaking against a planned GE eucalyptus tree forest. In both Brazil and the United States, indigenous populations' ways of life are being threatened. In October 2014, a coalition of indigenous activists gathered in the mountains of North Carolina for an Indigenous Peoples Action Camp against genetically engineered trees. The Indigenous Environmental Network and members of the Eastern Band of Cherokee condemned the planned GE trees and called them colonization of the forests. The groups also said that GE trees threaten the American chestnut tree. And following the USDA's decision not to test the trees, an alliance of indigenous and environmental groups publicly condemned the agency. The campaign to stop GE trees denounced the U.S. government and the Department of Agriculture for failing to heed the calls of public opposition to the GE loblolly pine. Indigenous communities fear forest colonization, while their counterparts in Brazil, they're saying basically that this GE plan, these trees are going to threaten their entire livelihood by contaminating the local honey with genetically engineered pollen, which they say is going to hurt the bees and probably mess up their honey, and that's going to affect their very livelihood. That's how they make their money, by harvesting and selling it internationally. So I have some links here for you to check out. There's a documentary on synthetic forests and the dangers of trees. Check that out, watch it, educate yourself, find out more about these important topics. I really appreciate you guys being willing to look at that, because I know that might not be your typical subject. I've got one more article to go over, and this one's an important one, so please hang out just for another 5 or 6 minutes, and then we're done for the night, and then I'll get to our latest conscious resistance song. You can end your podcast jamming out a little bit. But this one is going to come out on Wednesday, I believe. It's for Mint Press News, and it's about reverse drug stings, which I've talked about in the past, and I've done even a short podcast video before on these. And I'm not sure what the article is going to be called just yet. Who knows? But if you're watching it, you can see on my screen, and you see I have 2 titles: the latest tool for creating criminals in the war on drugs, or another tool for creating victims of the war on drugs. Either way, it's all the same. And this article goes into very specific examples of places that we have seen the government and local and federal agencies increasingly create crimes, whether it's accusing people of terrorism or drug and weapons crimes. And also we've seen an increase in the militarization of the police. So I'm looking at these 2 instances and recognizing that, yes, we are living in a police state. The police are creating crimes and then framing people for them, essentially, and trapping them, but really walking that thin line where it can't technically be called entrapment and where judges' hands are tied. And one of the ways that they're doing this involves the reverse stings. And this is specifically the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives, otherwise known as the ATF. That horrible, horrible agency. So over the last decade or so, the ATF has been making use of the reverse stings, which essentially involves them sending in confidential informants. So somebody on your block gets arrested for drugs. The cops are like, dude, if you want to avoid big jail time, you better give us a few people. So, go to your friends and set up this operation. So what they do is they send in the person, the informant now, to talk to their friends and say, hey, I know this other guy, he sells drugs. Or he delivers drugs for people, but he's really disgruntled. He's upset. He said they're not paying him enough, and he knows how to, where they hide their drugs. He'll help us rob it from them. All we need to do is get, a couple of guns and a crew of people, and we can rob, and they make up some ridiculous amount of drugs. And then the confidential informant, the friend who was arrested, introduces the courier, the drug deliverer, aka an undercover ATF agent, to his friends and says, guys, check out this cool dude. And the guy gives them their bullshit story about how they can come rob a house and it'll be really easy. They just got to bring some guns and there's going to be, 40 plus kilos of cocaine and all these weapons and all this money, etc., etc. And they make the whole thing up. The house doesn't exist. The drugs don't exist. The money doesn't exist. And the weapons don't exist. So what they do is they go into poor neighborhoods and this is the words of one judge, they troll poor neighborhoods for people who are either already predisposed to crime or people who, when you're in a situation where you're trying to just survive and somebody offers you a shitload of money to do something that might sound a little bit outrageous, you might go for it. You know what I mean? Like, you might actually go for it, even if you thought it was a stupid idea, because you don't really have a lot of options. But this is what the government's doing. Instead of actually going out and catching real criminals instead of being criminals, and even if you think that they should be out there catching people for like cocaine or really violent criminals, right? Let's assume that they do that and that's legitimate. They're not even doing that. They're just taking people off the street. They're not taking any more drugs off the street because the drugs weren't real. They're not taking any more weapons off because the weapons weren't real. They made the whole thing up. And even more ridiculous is then when they try these people, since the drugs were made up, they get to come up with some arbitrary number just pulled out of their ass and then send people to prison based on these things. So in my article, I cover all those details I just went through, and I cover some cases that the judges have been pushing back. And I give a specific example with somebody that I was lucky enough to interview, Melvin Taylor of reversestings.org. It's an organization, a website that he founded with another prisoner who is incarcerated, and his name is Danny D. Block. And Melvin Taylor was arrested in 2006. Yeah, 2006. Just May 2006. For his supposed involvement in one of these reverse stings. And I tell the story that I called from freedom to prison in less than 24 hours. He was going to visit a friend who didn't realize that one of his other friends had been caught and was turned into an informant and was working with the ATF to try to entrap him. Melvin Taylor's friend was Marlon Barnes, and this supposed friend of his, this snitch of his, kept trying to get him involved in some crazy scheme to rob this house, and they told him all this crazy stuff. He never clearly ever said he wanted to do it. Melvin just happened to come by the hotel and was there, and the thing just played out like it is. The next day they come and arrest him after they all talk about it. And Melvin, and the recordings show this, he never explicitly said, okay, we're down, let's do this. They even expressed skepticism, but as usual, these kind of things don't get played in the court. The jury doesn't hear the full story. And he was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Marlon was sentenced to 30 years. And they're one of hundreds of people who are being set up like this. People who Melvin was working, he was going to school, and so was Marlon. They were both working and had, never been arrested. They weren't violent criminals. So you can't even make that excuse in this specific case. I mean, it's fucked up. And when I talk to him, I feel like, okay, I'll write an article. I'll see if I can do something for you. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to do whatever I can. But this is pretty fucked, dude. And I don't know. I hope that this article will expose that to more people. And if you know people who have been personally affected by this, please contact reversesting.org or contact me. And I'm really just trying to do my part to get the word out on this, because this is just like with the terrorism shit, where they, supply everything, the means and all that, to the people, the weapons, whatever it is, and get them to talk or say some crazy thing, and then they arrest them. And even now, the good thing though is that certain judges are now starting to push back on reverse stings and saying like, hey, these people weren't even going to commit crimes, and they wouldn't have committed crimes or even discussed committing crimes if it wasn't up to the government coming in there with their informants. So hopefully we'll see some more pushback, and these people will get freed from prison in the long run, and maybe get paid some money. You can never get your life back, but maybe they can get paid off and live a better life while they're out, after they do get out. And yeah, look out for that. That'll be on mintpressnews.com. And that's all I got, guys. Those are my top stories of this past week. As I said earlier, you can find all of my articles at derrickbros.contently.com. You can follow me on Twitter at dbrosLiveFree. And please do subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/consciousresistance, and our SoundCloud, soundcloud.com/TCR live. Thank you guys for listening. I'll be back next week. As always, if you can hear this, you are the resistance. Peace.
When I was in the 3rd grade, I thought that I was gay, cause I could draw. My uncle was, and I kept my room straight. I told my mom, tears rushing down my face. She's like, Ben, you've loved girls since before pre-K. Trippin'. Yeah, I guess she had a point, didn't she? Bunch of stereotypes all in my head. I remember doing the math, like, yeah, I'm good at Little League. A preconceived idea of what it all meant. But those that like the same sex had the characteristics. The right-wing conservatives think it's a decision, and you can be cured with some treatment in religion. Man-made rewiring of a predisposition, playing God. Oh nah, here we go. America the brave still fears what we don't know. And God loves all his children, it's somehow forgotten. But we paraphrase a book written 3,500 years ago. I don't know.
And I can't change, even if I tried, even if I wanted to. And I can't change, even if I tried, even if I wanted to. My love, my love, my love, she keeps me warm. She keeps me warm. She keeps me warm. She keeps me warm.
If I was gay, I would think hip-hop hates me. Have you read the YouTube comments lately? Man, that's gay, gets dropped on the daily. We become so numb to what we're saying. A culture founded from oppression, yet we don't have acceptance for them. Call each other faggots behind the keys of a message board. A word rooted in hate, yet our genre still ignores it. Gay is synonymous with the lesser. It's the same hate that's caused wars from religion, gender to skin color, the complexion of your pigment. The same fight that led people to walkouts and sit-ins. It's human rights for everybody, there is no difference. Live on and be yourself. When I was at church, they taught me something else. If you preach hate at the service, those words aren't anointed. That holy water that you soak in has been poisoned. When everyone else is more comfortable remaining voiceless, rather than fighting for humans that have had their rights stolen. I might not be the same, but that's not important. No freedom till we're equal. Damn right I support it.
My love, my love, she keeps me warm. She keeps
press pause. Progress march on, with the veil over our eyes. We turn our back on the cause, till the day that my uncles can be united by law. When kids aren't walking around the hallway, plagued by pain in their heart. A world so hateful, some would rather die than be who they are. And a certificate on paper isn't gonna solve it all, but it's a damn good place to start. No law is gonna change us, we have to change us. Whatever God you believe in, we come from the same one. Strip away the fear, underneath it's all the same love. About time that we raised up.
I can't change